Well, welcome everyone. This is the info session for the Highlands and Islands Climate Change Community Grant, and this is the launch of our New Voices grant that we are running this year. My name is Lauren Pyott, and I'm the Network Coordinator of Science Ceilidh, and I'm also joined by Science Ceilidh Director Lewis Hu, and together we are helping deliver this grant along with our partners, the BSA, the British Science Association, and we have Christina Fuentes Tibbitt from the BSA joining us today on this call to say a little bit more from their perspective, as well as Jen Grove from UKRI, the UK Research and Innovation, who are funding this programme.
Thank you. So just an overview of the session today. So as I mentioned, we'll have some brief introductions from Jen Grove and Christina Fuentes Tibbitt from BSA and UKRI. That will give an overview of the grant that we're launching at the moment, and then go into a little bit more of the details in terms of who specifically this grant is for, the types of things that you can apply for, and some of the kind of wider details. Christina will also then give you an idea of the actual application process. So hopefully that will kind of answer any kind of specific questions you might have about how to apply and the actual application process itself. We'll speak a little bit about what it means to work with a researcher and the kinds of ways that this kind of partnership could look. And then, of course, importantly, we'll have lots of space for questions and answers at the end. And then we'll wrap up with some kind of next steps and final questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, embarrassingly a picture of me there on the screen. Nice to meet you all. Really, really pleased that you're here today and that we can share more about this this opportunity. So yeah, as Lauren said, I'm from UK Research and Innovation, which is we are an arm's length organisation essentially that are part of the government. So we're now part of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, this new department that was recently formed. But UKRI have existed for several years. We essentially give out research and innovation funding on behalf of the government, and I sit in the public engagement team in UK Research and Innovation. I'm a program manager, and so, as Lauren said, we are the funders of this program, and we've been working with the British Science Association and Science Ceilidh for the last year on the first phase of the funding. And so I thought it would just be useful just to give you a very quick couple of minutes on where we're coming from in terms of why we're supporting this and kind of what we're looking forward to in this second phase that we'll be talking about today. So obviously, I don't need to tell you kind of how urgent the issue of climate change and climate adaptation is, and that's true for the work that we fund and for ourselves as an organisation as well. And my team in particular in the last few years have been thinking about how we can best support particular communities and places across the UK in the way that they are trying to adapt and address the issue of climate change. And we recognise that there are communities across the UK that are actually sometimes even disproportionately affected by climate change, and we know this is true in the Highlands and Islands, but also they can be those same communities who are but potentially more removed or have fewer opportunities to engage with research and the kinds of and sort of shape the research actually that might be able to address those challenges. So kind of more widely within our organisation, and as I say, particularly in my team, we're looking at ways in which we can help research and innovation to be more connected with wider society. So we're kind of talking about breaking down barriers essentially between wider society and research and innovation. And one of the ways that we're doing that is to try and ensure, as I say, that research can be better led by communities themselves that are affected by research or that could benefit from research, and really kind of be able to shape that research so that it can address what communities need and what matters to them in a particular place, and for this context around climate change. And a key way that we're doing that, and we've been working with the as I say, with British Science Association and Science Ceilidh on this and various other organisations, is to actually give funding directly to communities. So you might know that usually in research funding, the funding goes to universities or kind of research organisations. This is a new way of funding for our organisation. Other places do it as well. And that's to give the money directly to communities so that they can hold the money and decide who to work with, but also direct how that research happens. And that's kind of trying to get away from this idea of particularly issues around going through universities, particularly things about power dynamics, but also kind of having to get around very kind of clunky, often university systems, but also this idea of kind of trying to avoid researchers, and I'm speaking as, you know, as a previous researcher myself here, sort of this idea of researchers kind of parachuting into communities, and then sort of not that research not having any direct benefit for those communities. So that's what we're trying to sort of get away from in this approach. So so phase one, as you may have seen already, and I'm sure we'll be talking about today, we saw these kind of amazing results of doing this, of funding local groups in the Highlands and Islands to help them help their communities respond and adapt to climate change by working with a researcher. And as I say, we can talk a bit more about what that means and what the potential for that. And so we really wanted to move on to the second phase and open up this opportunity to more groups within the Highlands and Islands, particularly those groups who have fewer opportunities, as I say, traditionally to engage with research. So kind of trying to diversify the types of people that we're working with. So yeah, we're really pleased to be working on this second phase, and we're really excited to see what comes next, and hopefully potentially working with some of you as well. Hope that wasn't too long, Lauren, sorry.
No, it was wonderful. Yeah, thanks very much, Jen, for sharing all that and giving us a bit of background about why you're wanting to fund this. That's brilliant. So Christina, I'll pass on to you, and you can say a little bit more about the British Research and British Science Association. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep it kind of brief so we can get into the chunk of stuff. But yeah, just to say, so I'm a community engagement manager at the British Science Association. So the BSA, our vision is a future where science is more relevant, representative, and connected to society. So we run a number of programs where we are trying to support and reach people who are underrepresented and underserved by science. So within the community engagement team, our work is crucial, so you can imagine, to fulfilling the strategy. And some of the ways we do this is by supporting a large network of grassroots community organizations from across the UK. This includes all 4 nations of the UK. We also run a number of programs with community organizers and researchers, including small grant schemes and funding like this funding that's specifically designated to help communities engage and connect with research. So that's where this program comes in. So, I'm just going to transition it very eloquently to this program. Thanks, Lauren. So what is the aim of the Highlands and Islands Climate Change Community Grant Scheme? So the whole aim of the program is really to connect researchers with communities so that the communities can lead local projects that help to adapt and respond to climate change issues. Really crucially, these are issues that are affecting and relevant to these local communities, and that's why we want to work with and have the community groups lead the projects. So we're trying to empower them with this scheme, but we're also providing them with researchers so they can get the benefit of the researchers' expertise and knowledge, but that also so that the researchers can gain an appreciation and learn from the expertise of the community groups as well. So as Jen mentioned, this is the second round of the scheme. So in this round, we're specifically seeking to amplify some of the existing community voices that we supported in the first round, but we also want to support new voices in the program. So we want to hear from communities that we've not touched on before, or worked with before, rather. So I think we've got a lovely little video to show you a bit about what was really achieved in the first round of the program, and what we're hoping to achieve in the second round.
The Highlands and Islands Community Climate Change Grants is bringing together different projects from across the Highlands and Islands, ranging from Orkney to Eriskay on the west coast of Scotland. That for me really showcased the power and leadership that exists already around community action and explores what bringing researchers in a way that's equitable, in a way that is supported, to work out what can happen when you work together.
I think rather than feeling that we were parachuting in an academic or a researcher to tell people how they should be working with their coastline, but actually for people to realise there was that expertise within the island. I think this project was all about that sort of interchange of local knowledge and scientific knowledge.
Just to have that shared community of energy and enthusiasm surrounding the climate situation and surrounding research, but community-led research especially, because a lot of research is somewhat based purely around results data-wise rather than results community-wise. And I think this is definitely a different aspect and a different approach, which is a breath of fresh air in comparison to some of the other funding schemes that I've definitely been on.
Hopefully that gives you a quick little taste of what we've achieved and what we're trying to continue to achieve with phase 2 of the program. So this map shows the community organizations that we worked with in phase 1, as well as the researchers who they were paired with. So you can see we had a really nice geographic spread across the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. And if we want more, if you're interested in more details about these projects, we've got project summaries on the BSA website. We also have case studies of 3 of the projects. So there's lots of resources going into what was achieved and the process that was that the groups went through in phase 1. I think we want to talk about phase 2 now. Is that...
So I can come in at this point, I think, start talking about the new grants. I've realised I'm wearing the same thing as I'm featuring in the video. I swear I have other clothes. My name is Lewis. I'm working with Lauren with the Science Ceilidh and with BSA from the first round of the scheme. And this new phase of the program seeks to do 3 main focus points. So with the current projects that we supported, we really wanted to develop this into a bigger, more sustainable network, acknowledging the work that's going on across the Highlands and Islands already, and building on the stakeholders that we've been working on in year 1. For the current projects that we support, that is looking at focusing on building capacity rather than delivery of a project. But as Christina and Jen have already talked about, we really wanted to make sure that there's an opportunity to bring in new groups, to have this opportunity to connect with the researcher. And also really, I guess, important to acknowledge that even within the climate research and innovation space, that there are certain voices that are not represented, that have been historically marginalized, and that we wanted to give a particular focus point to, not just within our network, because we believe that having these, we need everyone's voice to be able to climate change is a systemic issue, and so we need to be able to bring everyone together for that. So we focus on the new voices grants. There's going to be a lot more information, but we want to talk a bit specifically about this call. And if you're interested in some of the case studies, the resources, the full video that was teased just then, you can find that out a little bit. You can find that on the website. So in terms of new voice grants, these are projects that must involve working collaboratively with the researcher, but you don't need to be matched currently with a researcher at this moment in time. And we'll talk a little bit about what those projects can be a little bit later as well. But you don't need to be matched, but you just need to be open with the idea of working with research and what that might support. So working collaboratively with research, you don't need to be matched. We're very much open to groups that are, this may be the first time working with a researcher, and also potentially in climate change as well. And again, in our previous set of projects, so we had groups that were much further in the climate change journey and those who were taking the first steps, and the researcher helped support them in that journey. We are actively prioritizing applications from those who are traditionally underrepresented in science, research and innovation, and that specifically for this call includes people from ethnic minority backgrounds, speakers of minoritized language, which for us, for the purpose of this, includes Gaelic, and people from communities that face disadvantage, including in terms of education and economic opportunities specifically. Now, obviously, you know, we appreciate that these terms, one, there's always a challenge with language, and so people might not necessarily identify these terms. We've tried to pick terminology that hopefully understands what we're looking for, and also recognizing that these identities do intersect with lots of other types of backgrounds as well. So just acknowledge that, but particularly for this particular round, this is something that we are focusing on. And in terms of Highlands and Islands, how we are defining that for the purpose, it's similar to how we've defined it for the first round, but based on the council areas. So that includes Highland Council, Moray Council, Cuyin and Elan Shear. good job. Practicing my Gaelic. Orkney Islands Council, Shetland Islands, Argyll and Bute, and also Isles of Arran and Isles of Cumbrae. Next slide. And what types of activities? So again, in some ways, this could involve a wide range of different topics around climate action and change, but here are a couple of themes. It could be about how we eat and grow food, how we travel sustainably, how we source and use sustainable power, how and where we live in the future, so around depopulation, migration and housing, how we manage waste and consumption, and how we protect our natural environment and biodiversity. So both in our previous round, we had quite a wide range of different activities and open to different topics. And again, important to acknowledge, we're looking for both a mix of mitigation type strategies as well as adaptation type projects as well. Next slide, and hand over to you.
Excellent, thanks for that, Lewis. So so as Lewis mentioned, there's a kind of a wider program of activities throughout this funded program. So the deadline for this grant is on 10th of May at 5 o'clock. And then after that process, we will be involved in matching researchers with the successful community group. So that will kind of take place throughout May and June. We would like to let people know if they've been successful by the beginning of June, so that we can really be involved with matching you together with those researchers in an appropriate way. Activities are likely to take place after the summer holidays. We're aware that summer is, a busy time for everyone in the Highlands and Islands. So starting from September through to March 2024. And as Lewis mentioned as well, we'll be having these community of practice sessions that will be bringing all the groups together, both in terms of the funded programs from last year, as well as the new programs, so that we can have a kind of space to kind of learn together and share our thinking around climate change in a shared space. We'll also be inviting wider stakeholders to the second half of those sessions, so that we can kind of bring in other voices to that conversation. So there'll be the first one will be that we'll have an in-person one in September. The location will be kind of confirmed near the time, and then also have a third one in November and early December. So that our first one for that, will be at the end of June at some point, an online one. These will likely be kind of half-day events that we can join online. And then at the end, we'll be able to kind of share together and share our learning and practice together. Okay, so Lewis, were you wanting to talk a bit more about the community of practices and the kind of wider network? You kind of mentioned it a little bit already.
Yeah, I can do it very quickly. What's really important for us is that we appreciate there's a limitation to project-based funding, but again, there's lots of great Highlands and Islands activities. Obviously, the whole point of the programme is valuing the expertise that's within the community as well as the research partners. And so what we try and bring people together for these community practices is trying to build this network. And hopefully that adds connectivity. There's, there's always challenges in this type of work. And so absolutely in the room, we believe there is the expertise for people to work as a peer network as well. So we bring people together. There's the wider network as well in terms of the stakeholders that are involved through this process, both from the academic and community side. And there's also additional support that we'll be giving you throughout, thinking about beyond just the project delivery, what else can we do to help support the activities, to think about the what next, the groups to think about what next and build capacity as well. And on a very practical level, if you've got any questions throughout, there are frequently asked questions, documents, support documents, and Christina's going to talk a little bit about the questions very shortly. And of course, myself and Lauren are resourced to answer any further questions as well.
So I'm going to pass over to Christina now to go over the application process in a little bit more detail.
So last year we found people thought it was helpful to actually see the actual physical application. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you the actual form. So in the guidelines, we do outline the questions. We can also there's also PDF available, but just since we're all here, we'll just actually talk you through the actual application. So can everyone see that? Okay. Great. So here's the application form. So the first thing to say is at any point, you can progress through it. So you'll see, I'm not going to fill it out. You can just go through it to see it. You can tick this box up top to save your progress at any point. and you'll get an email with a link to log back in. So you can go, start it, do as much as you want, come back. It's just a bit of an introduction. I won't talk you through that. First page is just basic details about yourself, contact information, some information about your group. Pretty basic bits. We'll get to the the meat of it in a minute. So you have to select the category that your group falls into. We've got some pre-listed categories here, but if you don't feel your group fits into either of those, you can enter your own category. And then similarly, just different categories describing the type of work your organization does. But again, if you don't feel like it, I mean, it's a pretty exhaustive list, but if it doesn't quite match, you can select other and put your own. And then we just want a really short description of your organization, including the communities that you work with. And this is probably something that you've got written. What we're expecting here is something that you probably already have written, just a quick summary of your group. As has already been highlighted, so for this grant scheme, we're specifically looking for groups who work with these target audiences. So you're asked to take, you can take more than one, but you have to take one. So again, we've listed the people with ethnic minority backgrounds, speakers of minoritized languages, and communities facing disadvantages. So those are our target communities. And we've also listed the areas that the groups need to be based in. So we just select one of those. Okay, so now the more meat of it. So project description, you're going to be asked, this is up to 500 words. By no means does it need to be 500 words. So don't feel like you need to put as much as that. But this is really for you to tell us what you're thinking about doing. For a lot of these questions, you'll note that we've put tips on the bottom. So make sure you look below. So there's some tips here about what you might want to discuss. So how your activities are responding to a local need. What topics are you going to focus on? And this is a really crucial bit. So this does not need to be a complete, fully formed plan. So we recognize, as has already been mentioned, that a lot of the groups will be coming to this completely new. We very much want to work with you and support you in developing your project. So don't feel that this needs to be totally detailed and finalized. We just want to get your thoughts. And then the other bit here is, are you working with a researcher? So if you, last year about half of the projects came paired with researchers. If you are, that's fine. So if you select yes, we ask you to tell us a bit about who you're working with and what relationship you've built, what you've done in the past. If it's a no, we'd like you to give us a bit of thoughts. Again, we recognize that, there's some tips down here. So if the answer is no, we want you to say, how might you work with a researcher? And here are some tips about some of the ways that you might consider working, some of the ways that our previous groups worked with researchers, and highlighting crucially that we're not going to fund projects that suggest only one-off interventions. So we don't want researchers just to come in for a single visit, consult, and then leave. These are really co-developed and co-created projects. Okay. And then a bit more about your project. So this question is to tell us a bit more about the communities that you're working with and how the topic is relevant to them. So this is only 200 words. Again, doesn't have to be that much, but and you can see the tip down here. So really thinking about, how are you going to involve how's the community going to be involved in this project? Why is it important to them? Are there any barriers that you anticipate facing in involving the community, and how are you going to address them? And then another fairly short 200 words only, from your perspective, how will you know that the project's gone well? So the BSA will be coordinating the wider program evaluations. You don't have to worry about, this isn't really like how are you going to use feedback forms or whatever. It's more, what outcomes are you looking for that will signify that the project's gone well. And again, there's some more tips on the bottom of these to help guide you. That's pretty much it, really. So the next page just talks you through the grant selection process and a bit about the evaluation that we're going to be doing, which we've talked about briefly, but you can read about. It's just to have you agree, basically, you agree to take part in the community of practice sessions, and that you will agree to participate in the wider program evaluation. So that's just a tick box. And then budget. So we've got a separate slide after this to talk about the budget. So I might not go into details here, but all this asks you to do is to list out certain items on a very high level. So, you know, materials, equipment, travel. We don't need to know specifically what equipment you need, but you just list the amount. You'll see notes down here saying, you know, the budget can't exceed £5,000. Yeah, I'm going to go into budget in just a second. So I'm going to talk about in a separate slide what can and can't be covered, but just to show you how you're going to enter that actually on the physical form. And if you need to add more lines, you say that. And then it's just the financial information. So we need to pay you. So this is how we get you the money. So yeah, just bank account details. So do come again, you can say you work on the project, save the application, come back when you've got these financial details. But obviously before you submit, we need the details. That way there's no delay between us you know, approving the grant and getting you your funding. And then it's just a bit of extra information about how you heard about the grant. Agreeing to the terms and conditions, so please do this will take you to a page to read the terms and conditions of the grant, which are fairly nothing too controversial, I think, in there. And then you'll have the opportunity to review your answers at the end, which it's not letting me do because there are 24 questions that I didn't answer. So fair enough. But just to show you that, yeah, the form's not too scary. So then just to follow that up with a bit more information about the budget and what is eligible. So again, the grants are for up to £5,000. As with the first thing to say is, as with the project plan, we don't expect you guys to have a finalized budget. You know, a lot of the groups are coming to this new, the majority we imagine won't be matched with the researcher. So we can't expect you to have a finalized project plan and budget if you've not even yet met with the person that you're going to be co-delivering the program with. So it's very much top line figures, how you think the money could be spent. So yes, what we also, so these are things that the funding can be spent on. Project specific staff costs. So these are staff costs that aren't covered by other funding. Then again, are specific to delivering this program. I'll go back to researcher costs in a minute. So any materials, travel for volunteers as well, food, catering for events, or again, volunteers. Publicity, speakers, overheads for the group. So that's up to 10% can be goes for overheads for the community group. Now, the big question mark is the researcher costs. So obviously, if you're not paired with the researcher yet, not already working with somebody, if you've not worked with somebody before, you don't know who you're going to work with, it's hard to estimate that. So some researchers will have their time covered by their institution. Some of them won't, some of them can be freelance. You might be paired with somebody who's local, or it might be somebody who needs to have their travel, and it might be substantial. So what we are advising groups to do is to reserve 30% of the funding for potential researcher costs. So we're suggesting that you only in your budget outline up to 70% of that £5,000 so that we have enough to work with a potential researcher you're going to be matched with. Now, again, the rest of your budget will be finalized with the researcher anyway, so we're not holding you to these numbers, but it's just to get a rough idea. And then on the right there, you can see specifically things that the funding cannot be spent on, which I think is nothing too outlandish. Are there any questions specific to that?
I just had a quick question. If the 30% didn't have to be paid to the researcher, is it legitimate to say, okay, we put that 30% back into the pot for the core activity costs? Yes.
So we won't actually award the funding until your budget's been finalized. So until you have been paired with somebody and you know how much those researcher costs are. So yes, of course, if it ends up being that their costs are less than the 30%, then you'll have the opportunity to add to your budget to say how you're planning to use that additional funding.
Thanks, that's a great question. Is there any other questions just for the moment?
Maybe just to stress that point, I know we've said it a few times, but in terms of, so yeah, once we know which of the groups are successful, if they need to be matched with the researcher, there's going to be a lot of support through that process to then develop that final proposal, as it were. So obviously we want to make sure that, that honours what was accepted, but ultimately in terms of the budget, in terms of the methodologies, that won't be finalized, and that will have a lot of support with myself and Lauren and the BSA team to develop to that point. So yeah, the things like the budget, that will all be finalized by that point, hopefully by about I think by end of June is the kind of timeline for that. But just realize that we may have glossed over that a little bit, but there's a lot of tailored help there.
Yeah, that's really worth saying, Lewis, thanks. So if there's no other questions about the budget and application form specifically, but as you say, we can come back to that. We thought it would be worth speaking a little bit about what the nature of this partnership with researchers would look like. As we've said before, we don't expect that people should have already worked with a researcher before or necessarily have an idea of a researcher that they'd like to work with. So we kind of wanted to give you a flavor of the types of things that you could work on and the nature of that relationship. So as Christina said, we're really not looking for a project that's a kind of consultation on a community from a researcher, but really for it to be a community-led project. So specifically ideas that around climate change that matter to the communities, and then they would work kind of co-productively and collaborate kind of equally with the researchers to think about how they can address those issues in a meaningful way. So we're also kind of looking for then perhaps longer term relationships with research, whether it's perhaps working with that particular researcher in a more long-term way, or thinking about kind of researcher skills that can kind of be used within their community work and action in a longer term way. And as we say, we really don't need you to have had that kind of idea of a researcher in place already, but perhaps thinking about what types of activities would you like to be involved in with a researcher, and how might you like them to kind of help your existing work within the community and around climate change. So just a note of the types of things that we're unlikely to fund. Again, Christina's already highlighted this, that if it is a kind of more research-led project, we're less likely to fund that. This is not a research grant. This is really for community-led research projects. And so, we want ones that are going to be collaborative in that sense. And again, not really wanting to fund things that are doing research on a community, but it's definitely about the knowledge flowing both ways in that sense. So to give an idea of the types of things that could happen, as we say, it could be about knowledge exchange, and that could come both ways. So it could both be in terms of researchers kind of sharing some of their knowledge around climate change issues that matter to the communities, but also for communities to share their own perspectives on issues, that then can kind of lead to more meaningful engagement from the researchers' side as well. It could be specific actions and kind of tools that could be shared. Some other groups in the past have developed kind of specific programs for engaging the community with a particular climate change trial. There was a wonderful kind of reusable cup trial with businesses, and kind of using research models and practices to enable that to happen. Or maybe about how to kind of engage communities in other ways around climate change issues. And then also kind of sharing very specific skills as well, whether that's kind of scientific research methods or other processes that can be involved in this kind of thing. So we've got a few case studies to give you an idea. So as I say, there was this wonderful reusable cup trial that was trialed in Oban, also kind of sharing talks around the community, developing climate action plans with the community, and the researchers really, kind of helping with the community organizations think about how that will be meaningful for the individual communities and projects. Or sometimes it was involving a more kind of technical aspect of research skills and innovation. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second again, just because my computer is struggling with audio today, and Lewis is going to share another short clip of one of the case studies that used a more kind of technical innovation with their community.
Seaweed Gardens is a group of creative scientists and growers coming together around an experiment where we're using seaweed that we've gathered on the shore in Oban, and we're using it to make a natural fertilizer.
What we're trying to do is connect between our food and our land and our coastlines and our seaweed. Seaweed is amazing. It's something that takes up all kinds of nutrients and trace minerals that you might not even know we need, but actually are lacking from our soils at the moment. So we're looking at how we can make fertilizer from seaweed, whether some of our green or brown or red seaweed makes a difference. And for me, I think a really important part of it is building the capacity of the community to know that they can answer these questions through science and that there are loads of ways they can take it in the future.
Seaweed Gardens is part of the Highlands and Islands Climate Change Community Grant Scheme. It's funded by UK Research and Innovation, it's delivered by the British Science Association, and it's supported by us at Science Ceilidh locally. What's really exciting about this programme is it's really looking at public engagement with research, but when communities take the reins. We've really been thinking about what happens if community ideas around climate change, adaptation, what's important to them locally, and then finding researchers to work with them to support them on their ideas.
The project combines the ocean, nature, forests, gardening, but another significant part, our secret agenda, is really to actually build community and get different people who would never meet to work together.
Community building, everything we've done has shown that it's so key to building resilience against climate change, because the only way we're going to survive and adapt and learn to deal with the challenges that are coming is to find ways to support each other. And quite a lot of research we're doing is looking at how we can increase community resilience, how we can build that in.
We've got lots of food made out of seaweed.
I think the final meal is actually a really nice way to finish this project, because it's going to be so much about bringing everyone together and showing the rest of the community what we've done. You know, we're already talking about, can we do science art projects together? Can we find new ways to expand our growing and build the community? We're having conversations about permaculture in Oban, and can we bring people together for learning and knowledge exchange? So it could springboard into anything. I think that's the exciting thing about it.
Christina has just shared a link where you can catch up on more information. There's also case studies available on that link as well. Jen, I don't know if Jen, you want to speak to that, or Christina?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, Christina, add anything you want, but yeah, I suppose, yeah, I think it's important to stress that we are really interested in funding research right across different methodologies and disciplines. So yeah, not just different types of science, but social science, humanities, arts. Yeah, so right across the spectrum. So yeah, definitely, we'd be interested in hearing more about that.
And maybe just, you know, a lot of, as that project already probably demonstrated, there were arts-based approaches in that type of work. And the researchers really played really different types of roles. So some were more hands-on. Hannah was probably more supportive in the citizen science elements that you saw in the video, for example, but actually was also kind of an advisor and a volunteer in many ways as well. So I think what we're really interested in is that relationship, and there will absolutely, you know, we're keen to make sure that the projects that we do support get a chance to talk to a few different researchers as well, to understand there's a wide range of what research can mean, and then pick accordingly. So obviously, ultimately, the decision is with the community group in that perspective. But you know, absolutely, I think arts and humanities-based approaches and research is great. And as I said, we have a lot of social scientists and independent researchers involved in the current cohort at the moment as well.
Well, that's all we've got time for today then, folks. Thanks very much for joining today in person, if you're able to make it, or indeed for watching in your own time, perhaps if you weren't able to make it on the day. Hopefully this has been useful and has perhaps answered some questions you had about the grant. If you do have any other questions or would just like to chat about some of your ideas or ways that we can perhaps support you, then our email addresses are on the page here just now, as well as our number. You're always very welcome to just give us a call and have a chat, and we'd be really happy to chat through anything or see how we might be able to best support. But best of luck with your applications, and we look forward to hearing from you soon, hopefully. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.